Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zenker and I'm your host. And today I'm excited to talk about an important topic that's near and dear to my heart, and it's really because it's value-based. And we're going to talk about value-based leadership. And of course, I have amazing experts that are always here to have a discussion with me. And Salomé Trambach is here with me, and she is going to give us her insights. And she's quite accomplished in her background. She's a leadership coach and consultant, ICF certified. She's a growth mindset practitioner and NLP practitioner. She's got various degrees. She's based in Copenhagen, so I love that she's really global and international in the way that she thinks. And she's lived all over the world and speaks 4 languages. And she has a background in business development and 10 years of leadership experience. So without further ado, Salome, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am very excited to be here.
So why is value-based leadership, why is that something that, that you're passionate about?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I think that when you become really passionate about something, it's because it probably had an impact on you in your life. And I think that that's what happened when it comes to values and bridging that with leadership. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that I had some years of experience as a leader. And I think I started off very young without really thinking so much about what it meant to be a leader. And it was only later in life in a leadership role where I actually got to where I was challenged, and when my values were really questioned and really put into play. And that's when I actually realized what value-based leadership actually meant, because I had to start making decisions that were really congruent with what I truly believed in, and stood a little bit at a crossroads.
Well, let's
and that
dig
kind of
deeper
made
into
me
that. I want to hear about that. Like, I think people want to hear about that. Like, what was that moment, and how did that change you?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changed me. I was working in a role as a leader. I had grown a team of people, and I was in a situation where we had done a bit of a restructuring around the company. I ended up losing my team for, a better restructuring. It had to make sense in terms of the direction that the company was going in. And I was really struggling at that time with not so much the decision itself, but more around what it meant for me and what it meant for my team and what it meant for the values that I truly believed in and the way that things were done. And I think that we can often be in that situation, whether we are team members or leaders. We don't always control what's happening around us. That's just the way that things are. But you do have control over whether or not you want to challenge, speak up, whether you just want to, accept status quo. And I think that for me, I was in a situation where I wasn't completely happy. It took me some months to really realize that, and I wasn't really living up to what I realized was really important to me. And in that moment, I realized that in order to really stick to my values, which was very much around honesty, integrity, really just speaking your truth, regardless sometimes of, not completely regardless of consequences, but at least knowing that you've thought about the consequences and they're worth it for you. I accepted a situation where I knew I had to talk to my own bosses. I was a leader, but obviously I had bosses myself, and talk to them about my true feelings in that situation. The fact that I, felt that I hadn't been included in the decision-making process, things like that, that kind of can really end up making you question whether or not you belong in a certain place or not. And I think that what I did at that point was really, dig deep and really do a lot of self-reflection and a lot of thinking about the future, and just accepted what possible consequences there were, and those consequences were potentially not being a part of that company anymore, whether it was me leaving or being fired. And I think that that was important to, come to that step and say, what do I want to accept, and situations can vary, I think, for everyone, whether they can be really really serious or less serious, but you get to a point where you feel in your body that something isn't right. And I think that's when you know that you have to look a little bit deeper and think, is something that's happening around me right now not really matching with what's really important to me? Is it going against my values? And I think that that's what I did, and it actually enabled me to get an even better relationship with the people I was working with, because I was finally being 100% honest. And that was a big learning opportunity for me.
It's interesting. So, you were, correct me if I'm wrong, I just from what you said, it sounded like you were a little bit anxious about having that conversation, but at the same time, knowing that to be true to yourself, that was a conversation you needed to have. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course I was anxious, and I had to really, and I think getting, it's very normal to feel that anxiety to start with, and you have to really process it inside your mind. And once you get to a point where you realize, for me, at least when I realized, okay, this is worth it for me, this conversation is worth it, I accept whatever consequences might come out of that, because I respect myself, but I also respect that other people may not see things the same way that I do, and that's okay too. But I just needed to get that out there. And
I wanted to
happened.
highlight that because I think that there's a lot of people that find themselves in similar situations, right? So I wanted to highlight that it's normal. It's okay to feel anxious about having a difficult conversations. So many people in leadership roles, they avoid those difficult conversations, whether it's speaking to your value as a person and wanting to be included, like you were in that context, as you felt like you should have been included and you weren't included, or but there's lots of different circumstances of where people avoid this conflict. Maybe somebody's not performing, and your value in the organization is to maintain a level of performance and hold people accountable. And so that requires a difficult conversation. And we do feel this anxiety, and we have to feel the anxiety and do it anyway, right? That's what it is to uphold our own standards and values. Is not that we're not going to feel, it's not going to be easy because we have these values and standards, but we have to do it anyway because of honoring those values.
Right. So either you do that or you step away. I mean, of course, sometimes there are situations that can be really harsh, whether somebody treats you or treats others around you. I mean, especially if it's something, that happening to yourself, and you decide, okay, this is really, crossing all of your boundaries, and you decide to just step away and not deal with it. That's also okay. People have to figure out what makes sense. But if there is a bigger case or cause, to fight for, whether it's for yourself, for others, it's worth to consider if that conversation it needs to happen or not.
Absolutely. And I guess, I'm thinking of more the everyday type of things, not really that boundaries are crossed, but more that there are miscommunications and misunderstandings. And even those we don't open to those conversations. And I think, to your point about consequences, I think that sometimes we think that there are more consequences than there will actually be. Like you said, that opened up a better relationship of a conversation. So we build up like this consequence, like I'm going to get fired if I go in there and say, of course it's all in the way that you say it, right?
Yes. So what a key point right there, the way that you say it. I mean, a part of the whole concept of doing this and of being sticking to your values, part of that is of course the reflection part, but there's also the part around true self-confidence, which means that you are you're understanding yourself, you believe in what you believe. It may not be what others believe, and that's okay, but you're willing to accept your own strengths and also your own blind spots and weaknesses, and that gives you that power to step beyond the anxiety or the doubt that you might have, and to say, okay, I'm willing to also open that and show that to others, and like we're saying, accept the consequences of that, or just have great conversations and hear how other people what other people are thinking. I mean, that's what we want too. If one of the values is honesty and transparency, well, we're going to have to be a little bit open about who we are, because we have to never, I think one of the things that can sometimes be really triggering for people when I talk to organizations is the idea that you have to separate your personal self with your work self, and at the end of the day there really isn't. We're that same person. We are a whole person that comes to work. We are a whole leader that leads teams or that is managing a project. And we have to accept that those values that the values that we do have, of course we may have a value that we value family, but that still can show up at work, right? Like work-life balance can be an aspect of that. All these things all work together, and so it's important to pay value to that and to pay importance to that.
Yeah. I wanted to highlight that because you use the word consequences, and I'm going to ask us to reframe that, because consequences tends to have a negative connotation, right? So if we could reframe that to a word, so when people are thinking about having these conversations, is what are the possible outcomes, right?
Yep.
What are the potential discussions that could come from that? What are the potential outcomes? Of course, somebody could reject what you say, and that might lead to you wanting to leave, or them wanting you to leave, right? Those are possible outcomes. I just want to maybe reframe that, because again, I don't want us to go into the worst place and the worst possible, that there are many possible outcomes, and some of those possible outcomes are also that we're going to deepen our relationship, that we're going to be better understood, that we're going to I find that when we communicate it in a respectful way, that challenging only makes us better, right? When we challenge an idea, or we challenge someone else's way of thinking, and we do it in a way that says, how do we find a better solution here? Or how do we as a team work more productively together, or be more inclusive in the way that we work? Challenging makes us better. And for some reason, we think of that word consequences when we think, well, if I challenge, and I'm open, then that's going to go badly. But I think that we paint that picture worse than
it might be. Yeah. No, there is definitely, there's so much opportunity, right? I mean, as a leader, also, we have certain responsibilities that we need to also adhere to. And I think one of those responsibilities as well is to be able to show up a little bit like our true selves and our values, also because it enables others to do the same. So if we, we are the role model. So if we set up and say, this is something that matters to me, I want to know what matters to you. And of course, when we talk about in big corporations, the value-based leader is someone that bridges their own values with the values of the company. That goes hand in hand. And usually people work in environments, or at least, try and should the best that they can work in environments that match their values. And that's usually what companies should do. I worked a lot with startups, and whenever people would, start writing down their values and try to, I'm like, you have to bridge that in absolutely every single thing that you do, because you want people to know what you're doing, to understand the mission, to understand, the whole reasoning behind it, that bigger purpose, the principles that you're following, because you want to hire the people that believe in the same thing, who want to live in that way, who want to be principled in that way, and really starts there as well.
So tell me, so let's say, you're in I like what you said about bridging the gap between personal and or non-gap, right? If there's no gap, like how do you have them come together? So let's say you have a startup, and startups tend to be a little scrappier, and maybe, the working hours aren't always as conducive to work-life balance or family. How does, and that's a huge topic today, right? People have been home through the pandemic. They have less tolerance for being overworked, right? There's so many people feeling burnt out. How do we bridge that gap as leaders for ourselves and also our team when we have a value of a family, but we also have our work values? How do you go about bridging that gap?
Well, I think the most important thing, of course, is to be extremely transparent and really honest with people. So if you have a startup and you're just, whether you are almost a startup or a scale up, you can still be in that same situation where there's a lot of work, but it doesn't have, you don't have to overwork anyone, even though you are a startup. But first of all, it's about being very, very clear about the way that you see work, and the way that you're expecting others to show up at work. Because only then will you be able to hire the right people. I mean, I think often companies make the mistake of, almost pretending that work is a certain way, and then they're interviewing people get so excited, and once they enter the company, they're like, well, this isn't at all what I was expecting. And then well, all of your efforts and all of the investment that you put into this recruitment process failed. So you need to realize what values are important to the company, and what are you looking for in the people that you want to represent your product or service. Be as clear and open and honest about that. Talk about, what does that mean? If it means working long hours, what does that mean? In a day like today, does that mean being able to work at home, working long hours? What exactly does it mean? I mean, you can't expect anyone to want to work for you unless you're open and honest and transparent about that. And then
And does that mean certain days, like 2 days a week, or does that mean every day?
Yeah, absolutely. And also because people will people not only want a great work environment, they also want purpose. So if you have a very strong purpose, and very strong ideals at your company, and you have a mission, then a lot of people will go with you on that mission, but you have to empower the people that you're hiring. So yes, you might ask them to work hard. What does that mean? What are they getting? Are they getting a lot of responsibility? Are they getting trust? Like, what exactly is the give back here that you're offering? And that's really important, because a lot of people will work really hard in the way that they believe is right for something, for people that trust them, for people that give them responsibility, for people that honor their perspectives.
And a
Where they
purpose
can
that
say,
they're
hey,
passionate
I
about.
might be working hard, but I also have this. I'd like to raise my hand and give feedback on this. And if you foster a culture like that, you can create amazing results and create a company where everyone's going on Glassdoor saying, yes, you should absolutely apply. This is a great place to work. So there's a lot of ways of doing it, but you have to be clear. You have to be transparent. Just say it. It's like Elon Musk saying, firing half his staff as Twitter, and being like, okay, now everybody needs to work double as hard. Well, that's the expectation. So choose to stay or leave. Right? I mean, is it, so, are you does it match your values, or doesn't it?
Yeah, I want to come back to something you said, and that's totally true, right? And people know what they're getting, and then they can decide, do they want to stay under that condition or do they not? But I think it's about transparency, and you said it, but not directly. And I want to highlight that for people who are listening. It's also about consistency, right? I know somebody specifically who went to work for this very well-known company, and they talk about how they give you such flexibility, and there are, you can take yoga classes and wellness, and they really set those things as a priority. And this person has been asked to work 2 to 3 weekends a month, and is not given extra time, for that, and is not allowed to attend any of those wellness classes because their particular department just is overloaded, or they're loading it on this one person, and it's not consistent because the other people in the team are not having to do that because they refuse. So that person is ending up having to do it. So I think it's also a question of when you're a leader, not only you need to be transparent, but you need to ensure that there's consistency and fairness, right, in the organization, and that applies for everyone, because you can ruin your reputation as an organization. And I think, and I want to hear what you think, if you're that leader and there's inconsistencies in the organization, then you need to fight, for your people with the next level of management to ensure that you have enough staff, or that, whatever needs to happen in order to be that leader that people want to work for. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you can't control it, but there are things that you can influence that you might not be speaking up. And I guess that's also like a scenario, right, where you're not speaking up because you don't want to get fired, or but your people are all going to leave because they're upset because you're not doing your job as a leader.
Exactly. So you can, if you're managing a team, maybe you're not the CEO of that company, but if you're managing a team, you're trying to figure out at least what can you do on short term, and then what can you do long term, and what are the opportunities? If we talk about opportunities, what are the opportunities for you? What are the opportunities for the team? And of course, there might be things that aren't easy. And that's why, nowadays we talk so much about candor, we talk about feedback culture, And it's something we often talk about. Organizations have a really, really big difficulty in actually implementing that.
Yeah.
And it's you know, it's the leader, him, herself, themselves, that that can have an influence on that, and that can create a culture to say, well, we want to know how people are doing, whether we have to figure it out anonymously or we have conversations with people. We need to know what's going on, and we need to give that message to the people that actually have the power to make decisions. And then that's just how it needs to be. But it's not easy, you know. And that's the whole concept of speaking up. And I think being value driven, if you think about it, that means that you've reflected. That means that you've thought about it. A lot of leaders, they never even think about the fact that they're leaders, right? I mean, they're just coming in, they have responsibility. What does that responsibility mean? Why are you in that role? What kind of impact do you want to have? What's important to you? Where is your moral compass, your inner guide? You know, what is the intention of you leading? Asking yourself all of these questions, asking the people around you these questions, will lead to a healthier way of working, a healthier culture, a healthier environment. And it will enable people to speak up a little bit more. And that's key. So it's not just about talking about values, this fluffy concept that often people will see it as. It's about, well, what are the, you know, it leads to behaviors, it leads to choices that we make, making decisions. So it's extremely important, and it leads to performance, and it leads to people saying, yes, I want to work for this company, or I don't. Retention. It leads to investment. Like it's all linked. And so it's really important.
Absolutely. So is there anything that I didn't ask you yet that you feel is important to share with the audience?
I think that it's the most important thing is, you know, for those of you that are listening out there right now, is, you know, have you asked yourself these questions? What is the one question that would really help you get closer to knowing yourself a little bit more, to knowing your values a little bit more? What is an example of a place that you worked or a situation that you were in where you felt like something maybe wasn't completely right? What needed to be right? What did you need to honor about yourself? You know, what decision did you need to take? I think it's super important to ask, you know, for people to ask themselves, how do they want to show up? That's really the key thing, and look a little bit inwards to figure that out. It's not easy, but, you know, do it for yourself and then empower one other person to do it, and then we'll definitely create better work environments out there. I am sure of that.
Absolutely. And energy is contagious.
Absolutely.
So, you know, as you share that and you decide how you're going to show up and show up at your best and according to your values, it's contagious. It's like, you know, it's like a positive, you know, it creates that ripple effect because it gives other people permission to do the same. And it doesn't matter where you are in the organization, you know, lead from where you are. The people around you will be impacted, and that will make all the difference.
Yeah, because we can only really control what we do and not what other people do. So let's start with ourselves.
Absolutely. Awesome. Anything else that you wanted to share before we sign off today?
I think that it's good. I mean, I hope that the people will be curious, you know, go in and look at, you know, what are some questions you can find out there. You can contact me on my website as well at salometrambach.com, but otherwise be curious, you know, what leaders are out there you can get inspired by, companies, you know, look at Spotify or Lego or other startups that are really making an impact in the work today, and see how you can do it. There are many ways of doing it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. And again, what's that website that people can contact you at?
So it's salometrambach.com. That is my official website with my name. And then, of course, on LinkedIn, that is also a very easy way to reach out to me.
Fantastic. And we'll have that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you all for listening in and understanding how could you be living your values and focused on values. See, I think there's the values that you represent and what you believe in, but then there's also value, what creates value. That's also value-based leadership, is looking for what creates value in the environment that you're in, and creates value for you and creates value for other people. So what I really loved about what Salome said was that when we are value driven, right, then we're more reflective, and then we're going to be more purposeful about the actions and the choices that we make. And of course, that's going to lead us to greater performance and greater outcomes. So it's up to you guys listening to step back and really reflect on what are your values, what value are you looking to create for yourself and others, and how can you be more purposeful in those choices and actions and challenge and speak up and really live those values and live to create that value within others. So thank you for being here. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode.